Welcome. This is our third annual speaker series, and we've moved around a little bit, but it's exciting to be here. I'm Pete Krull. I'm president and founder of Krull & Company. We are Asheville's only socially and environmentally responsible investment management and financial planning firm. We work with individuals, trusts, retirement plans, nonprofits, churches, etc., and help our clients align their investments with their values. We believe our mission is to invest positively for the world. As a certified B Corporation, my team and I understand the importance of adding value to our community, employees, clients, and the environment. In fact, I'm proud to say that we were recently honored as a Best in the World B Corporation, which is the top 10% of B Corporations out of about 1,800. So we're really happy about that. The B Corporation ethic is very much in alignment with the philosophy of the Cradle to Cradle ethic as well. We're excited to be here in this really cool space. Who's been here before? So a lot of you haven't. We are grateful to people like Mac Pearsall who helped make this happen, that we can have this downtown space that looks great, that has this kind of technology, that we can have presentations like this. As our events have grown, we've had to recruit some partners to help offset some of the costs, help get the word out, and do some of the planning. So I want to recognize them, and by recognize them, what that means is you should do business with them. Asheville Beach Armor, Blue Wing Business Strategies, JB Media Group, Mountain Biz Works, the Green Sage, Mosaic Realty, Self-Help Credit Union, and Big Path Capital. And, of course, our consortium of other B corporations here in Asheville. Our final partner is the Barkhouse, and I'm going to ask one of Barkhouse's founders, Chris McCurry, to come up and introduce our speaker this evening. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Good to see you. You know, the really cool thing about this is that every person in this room has something in common, and that's that we're all users of products. And some of us in this room are makers of products. And so we've all come together this evening to have a conversation that should be an ongoing conversation about the impacts that the products that we're making and using have in the world. We have a great opportunity with Louis coming all the way from San Francisco to be with us. And the reason that I'm introducing Louis is that we are a Cradle to Cradle certified company. We have been since 2008. So we've been through, well, let's just say our relationship's longer than some marriages. Sometimes it's felt like it. It's been great. And, of course, we're standing here in front of you today because we're still in relationship with Cradle to Cradle. And I still very strongly feel that it is the most rigorous, most holistic, with a W, certification strategy that is available for product certification. So with that huge piece said, I'm delighted to be here. And I want to tell you not about Louis Perkins' bio, although one of the things that I did note, which is very important, is that he stated that he is a person who does the right thing, and I can attribute to having observed that. I met Louis a year ago in Georgia at a stakeholders conference where the manufacturers are invited to come together and to give feedback on the certification strategy, and we'll explore some variables on whether or not the version needs to change or how we're feeling about the 5 points within the strategy. So that was very helpful. That's a new thing that Louis brought to Cradle, and we're feeling very positive about that. So the thing, though, that I would like for you to know about Louis is that in the period of time that I've gotten to know him, is that I feel like this is, first of all, a very huge role. And as he goes through this strategy this evening with an in-depth presentation, you're hopefully going to have the sense of the commitment that it takes both to organize this strategy and then to participate in the strategy. It's a really big deal. I'll also say, and I should say, shouldn't I, that we're the first. Yeah, we are the first company in this international strategy that reached the platinum level of certification. Thank you. Yay! So that's across all 5 categories within the Cradle to Cradle strategy. Some people will have a material health certification, it will be in platinum, but we have a total platinum certification. You're going to go over those parts, great. I'm not going to hit on that then. So Lewis coming to this job, and he's been within this role for about a year, and what I have personally observed, which I think is really important, is I believe that Lewis is smart enough to take on this role, and he is strong enough to manage it, and he has certainly been brave enough to disrupt it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming out of Cradle to Cradle in the future. I hope that you will enjoy the conversation tonight. And with no further ado, I would like to introduce Lewis Perkins, Director of the Cradle to Cradle Institute.
All right, I'm going to turn this on now and make sure I don't have the feedback. Okay, good, right? All right, great. So I'm Lewis Perkins. Thank you for coming out to hear me talk about Cradle to Cradle tonight. So I'm curious as to who's, before this evening or before you got a flyer or invited to this, had heard of the term Cradle to Cradle. Good, good. How many of you knew that it also applied to a standard for products? All right, good, that's good. How many of you have heard the term circular economy? Good, okay, this is good feedback for me. Well, tonight what I want to do is talk, you will learn about what we do in terms of the standard, but really why I'm doing this and is not so much because I'm passionate about running a certification program. What I'm passionate about is a future that I think we're all working towards, and you're probably in the room because either you're interested in or you are participating in some way in what we're all doing, which is retooling the way we live on this planet, how we make things, how we feed ourselves, how we clothe ourselves, how we use our money, where we put our money, and how we power everything. I mean, there's so many variables to creating a future that is going to be one that I think many of us are working on. And so for me, when I get up in the morning, it's not that I'm thinking, oh, I'm so excited I get to run a certification standard, but it's really about that I'm working for the future, and that I believe that this is a theory of change that is a strong one and that many parts fit into. And so as you listen to this tonight, you'll probably connect to certain parts of it, and it'll seem almost like universal truth in some ways, because that's the way it was to me. How many of you have read the book Cradle to Cradle? Great, great. So Cradle to Cradle, Remaking the Way We Make Things is the title of the book. And I'll tell you a little bit about it just to kind of get started. The book was written by William McDonough and Michael Braungart. William McDonough lives in Charlottesville, Virginia. He is a green architect, and he was the dean of the Architecture and Design School at University of Virginia. Michael Braungart is a green chemist. His origins were with Greenpeace in Germany back in the 70s, and was a real advocate for cleaning up the sort of industrial systems around chemistry and creating a better standard for chemistry. And the two of them were introduced about 25, 30 years ago because their colleagues knew that they had a common belief, and that belief was that we needed to return to nature in terms of how we design. And that there was so much conversation around production and consumption and the negative impacts that we were having on the earth and that we were having on humans as a result of all of the stuff that we produced and the way in which we produced it. And yet both of them individually and then collectively coming together over this philosophy recognized that it was the sort of contemporary environmental movement, 70s forward, has been really one of less, about reducing your impact, has been based on sort of scarcity model thinking. We're running out of stuff. You know, we can't keep going this way. We have to do with less. We need to lessen our footprint, lessen our carbon, lessen our water, And to me, and this is what resonated to me about Cradle to Cradle when I first started reading the book and getting interested in it, is that humans are really wired for design and creativity and inspiration and growth, and that it seems that since we have sort of collected ourselves as a modern human species, we continue to want to build and create and grow and conquer, and discover new things and explore. And in many ways, that's sort of the delight that we get to experience as being humans, is the constant creation and creativity. And so if all of a sudden we're living in this moment of time that says, you need to lessen everything you're doing, you need to lessen your impact, there's sort of this counter feeling. We sort of feel in shame, right? You should take less of a shower, or you should use less hot water, you should not water your garden as much. And all of this is kind of, it makes us feel like we've been punished and that we have to behave in this way. What Cradle to Cradle does is it takes the flip of sort of the current thinking around reducing and says, what if we actually based the way that we build and make and things and live not on scarcity but on abundance? And it's really kind of counter to how our whole culture is established. And in many ways, it's counter to how capitalism and how the way we sort of prosper has been, because we think in terms of, creating an illusion of scarcity, where none exists, is how a lot of money is made. It's that supply-demand conversation. But what if we actually started looking at not so much that we have a production and consumption problem, but we have a design flaw? And that design flaw is that we've forgotten that we need to ensure that everything is a nutrient for a future system, and that we should eliminate the concept of waste. And in doing so, we should look to how nature assimilates toxicity and how nature uses water and energy in terms of creating new. And so a lot of what you'll hear tonight is sort of that return thinking of positive impact. And so we use the language in Cradle to Cradle a lot of positivity, because we really do believe that what we're doing is trying to create a future that is positive and one that actually has positive impact. So instead of giving me your sustainability report that says we've reduced energy by this amount, we've reduced water by this amount, we use this amount less toxic chemicals, instead tell me about the good nutrients that you're using. Tell me about the positive renewable energy that you've invested in as a result of your company, that you put back into the grid. Tell me about the water that's now cleaner coming out of your company or your system than it was going in, or the human lives that are better because you pay a fair wage, or higher than fair wage. So these are the things that Cradle to Cradle really delights in and inspires. And I think of the word delight a lot, because when I read the literature that came out of these founders and a lot of the quotes that come out of them, it really is about an elegant design for how humans can live and be here. So in that, the Cradle to Cradle established itself as a consultancy back in the late 90s. And Bill and Michael had written a beautiful set of rules or laws called the Hanover Principles, which I could put them up, but we get bogged down in them. They're beautiful, though, so Google them when you leave. But the Hanover Principles became sort of that foundation around Cradle to Cradle. And the book Cradle to Cradle came out in 2012, and companies like Nike and Patagonia and Ford and Steelcase and Herman Miller were consulting with them and learning about how can we create products and systems and facilities and manufacturing centers that really centered around this whole design thinking of circularity. Everything is a nutrient for a future metabolism, either biological or technical. So we don't want technical things going back into the earth, and we don't want biological things to be poisoned, So it's a way of looking at it. Is this a bad substance or a good substance? It depends. What nutrient system is it intended for? And that's a lot of the work that Cradle to Cradle does, is to identify what are you making, where does it come from, and where is it going next? So after the book came out, all these clients, these companies that I've rattled off, and about 250 more, said, hey, we're really working hard to do this work. Can we get some kind of credit? Can we get a stamp of approval that we're designing with this kind of philosophy? And what came out of that was a private recognition label called Cradle to Cradle. And so around 2004 to 2010, Cradle to Cradle operated as a private label for the clients of their two consultancies, MBDC in Charlottesville and IPEA out of Germany. But the advisors to Bill and Michael told them in the late 2000s, coming into about 2010, 11, 12, you got to let this thing go. If you really want this to transcend, it has to get bigger than you. It has to get beyond your own needs to control it or to have it shaped. You need to give it out and let it become what it needs to become. And I think in that, they knew that we wanted to maintain a North Star, and so letting it go is just this sort of thing for interpretation might also not be the right answer. So what if we took it and put that IP into a nonprofit and made a public, transparent, scalable standard that could be peer-reviewed by scientists and experts, and could be contributed to and could continuously improve as we all get better at the way we make things. And so that's the organization that I get to run, and I'm privileged to do that. And so for the first 5 years, as we were taking the standard, we really were sort of married into this idea that we were a certification scheme, and that companies would come to us or to our assessors, and we would look at how their products were made in accordance with our standard, and then we would certify against that. And there's about 380 companies that are doing it globally, with about 5,500 products totally across different categories that have been certified. Well, for 15 years of work, I'm like, it's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. And so where I am, and what you'll kind of hear and see from me a little bit, is this is time to get disruptive, as Chris said. This is the time for us to think, how does this really go big? How can we really experience exponential growth? And the answer is to democratize it, to make this available in a way that everybody can engage. So a lot of what we're working on right now with Google is building the technology for how companies can start to bring their own data into this kind of work and start to simulate back for designers how to replicate cradle-to-cradle thinking in a lot of different ways. We're still a third-party standard. We still verify inputs of materials, and so you'll hear me kind of talk about that. But as we're preparing for this thing called the circular economy, we're getting ready to really experience growth. And so I invite you all to listen and learn, and then join us in this. So cradle-to-cradle design really is a methodology, and so oftentimes you'll hear people refer to it as kind of the concept of recycling. Oh, it's not cradle to grave, it's cradle to cradle. Let's see if this is going, yeah. Oh, Pete made me put this up, by the way. This thing just came over today that I'm on the cover of this Recycling and Waste World, and I thought, hey, Brad Pitt may have Vanity Fair, but I've got Recycling and Waste World. Anyway, so the circular economy is really something that has been talked about for several decades as well, too, but in the last 5 or 6 years, about the same time that Cradle to Cradle Institute has been gaining its legs, there's an organization out of the UK called the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who partnered with McKinsey to put together some white papers that you can find, and there's many of them that are out there now, but the first one was called Toward a Circular Economy, and it estimated that there is a $7 trillion untapped market for material reutilization and systems for getting materials back. And it's answering that question of, hey, if 150 years ago, 200 years ago, when we started this industrial revolution, we were thinking there was never going to be an end. We could cut down as many trees, we could mine as much metal, we could pull out as much petroleum, make as much plastic, and we just keep going and going, and now we're realizing there's barriers and limitations. So the creativity comes out of that is to how can we look at all this material not as landfill or as waste, but as nutrients for future metabolisms. And that which can go back to the earth safely will design that way, but that which we can get back as a technical nutrient and put back into the system, we want to. So it goes beyond just like recycling something and turning it into something else. And you'll see a lot of sort of recycling movements that are kind of engaging with, this used to be, a billboard poster, and now I'm making, handbags or out of it or something. But what this does is actually looks at intelligent materials pooling. It's actually back to the molecular and polymer level of how everything that we're pulling out and putting into products should really go back. So nylon to nylon, poly to poly, et cetera. And how we actually create a system where we can sequester chemistry and put it back into its own needs. So when you say, well, gosh, who would this be for? Who is a circular economy for? It's really for everybody who's part of this whole supply chain of the design community. It's for designers, suppliers. This is a slide I put together based on the textile industry because I'm going to talk about what we're doing in fashion right now. Spinners, fiber producers, innovators of new materials. I would add chemical companies to that, design schools, those who are collecting and sorting, all sides of the equation, from bringing materials out of the earth, growing them, pulling them out, and putting them into products and back. So it's this concept of from the molecule to the metropolis and all the way back to the molecule, and that we sort of create this system that breathes just like we do. So the circular economy really is for anyone who's part of the product equation, which even includes the consumer and how they interact with getting things back. And so a lot of the design thinking that's being put out by organizations like Ellen MacArthur and their CE 100 are, what does the future look like for textile collection? Is it curbside? Do we advocate for something different? Are we looking to have retail centers become collection centers and showrooms? You know, how is Amazon going to take over and impact the way we order products? And then what role do they play in recollection? eBay is part of this, Amazon, all these big sort of retailers are thinking, we've got to disrupt the way we think about products coming in and going out. So what is the circular economy then? And it is an alternative to this concept of linear economy or cradle to grave economy. That's one where I make a product and I have no intention or responsibility as the designer as to where it goes or what it is next. It's not my job. I'm making it to be this object, this clicker, and that's all it's going to be from the time I design it. And so whether or not I'm using a plastic that can be upcycled or it's designed in a way I can easily disassemble, it's not my responsibility. But a circular economy way of thinking is actually to flip it and to say it is actually extended producer responsibility, not just to get materials back, but also for the designers to say, I have a stake in how I make this. It's my responsibility to make this in a way that can easily be disassembled, can easily come back, has high value in the polymers, uses the right kind of pigments and dyes so that it'll come back into the right kind of plastic, and that we've created partnerships and relationships, like I was calling it before, intelligent materials pooling, that we can bring materials back together. So a circular economy really happens from the design side into retailers, back to consumer households, reuse, repair, and recycling. We had a afternoon session today where we were talking about, well, how does this idea of production and consumption can be a good thing, and we can make as much and be as abundant fit with maybe designed obsolescence? And it's a great question, because the reality is we want to start making things better. We want to start making them with intention, you know? So at the same time that we're advocating for creating with abundance, we're also advocating for creating for the intention that this product will be made well, have high use, high impact, that the materials will have high impact and high use in a second life, second use, et cetera. So that piece of reuse, repair, and recycling is going to become more and more important. And at the same time that we're talking about circular economy, you're probably hearing about the shared economy, which is another movement that's very similar. And oftentimes when I've been to conferences, especially out in the Bay Area where you've got so many shared economy thinkers like Uber and Airbnb, you know, this idea that I've got something you can use and I'm not using it now, so I have inventory for you. And so this idea of combining that with a circular economy means maybe I don't need to go buy that saw that I needed to make one project at home. Maybe there's somebody in my neighborhood who has that saw. So that's definitely, shared economy is definitely a good part of the equation, I think, of the future that we're all building. And it fits really well with this, which is that you want to make it to last, you want to make it to share, and when you're done with it, you want to make sure that it can go back into another system. So you're not going to be able to see this slide, but it's one to kind of cue me to remember to talk a little bit about, within the design principles, there's all these circles. And so we talk about circular economy, and that's where the name comes from, you know, is that we're creating these loops. And oftentimes you'll hear closed loop as a term within this. You know, we want fibers from apparel going back into apparel, or we want we want plastics going back into the same kind of plastics. Reality is, I think what we're really building is open loops. We're building a system where these raw materials go into a product and come back into a second generation virgin quality raw material for life 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that potentially the companies that are the raw material suppliers may want to get into the business of leasing or owning the molecules or the materials, so that they're interested in getting it back into circularity and say, hey, you know, we're not mining this out of the earth anymore, but we're the ones who, you know, have the care of the molecule or the polymer. So creating the systems means that the nylon from this carpet maybe is better off in second generation from a performance standpoint going into a high heat resistant engine cap in an automobile. You know, and that's actually when I was at Mohawk Industries, that's what we did do with nylon after second generation, because it was hard to put a lot of it back into face fiber and still get the same performance that you wanted from carpet without tufting and, you know, pilling and things like that. So we put a certain percentage of content back into the face fiber, and then the rest of it we densify and sell to the automobile industry. These are the kinds of connections we want to start making. We're working now with H&M, which is daunting and interesting at the same time, because in many ways they're this sort of looming fast fashion problem we have of fast circularity, along with companies like Forever 21 and Primark and those that are just churning out fast, cheap clothing. H&M has a different vision on it, though, because they've proclaimed from their CEO that they're going circular, that the future is circular for H&M. And I think it's pretty smart. And being in Sweden, I like to think that they're sensible people, and they're thinking about what is the business model of this look like in the future. And I think they're also weighing it against that society's not really going to put up with that anymore, paying $9 for a shirt that you only wear once. I mean, I think that's going to go away. I think it's the death rattle of this whole consumer, kind of hyperactive behavior that we've been in. And so what's going to get replaced with that is still some kind of circularity of materials, but where they're saying, hey, this was all apparel, and now it's going to go into, second use materials for bags and curtains and home products and such. So they're looking at how they can take cotton and turn it into a cellulosic rayon in the next generation to use as, table napkins. I don't know. But we're starting to say, hey, you don't have to go back and grow more cotton. There's other ways that you can bring this material back and use it as a percentage use in materials. And companies like that are also thinking a lot about climate change, and they're thinking about what volatility of pricing cotton's going to have in the future, and can they really depend on cotton to remain cheap? And so they're thinking about it as the economics, the circular economy. So for them, this is a business decision. And I think that's where this is starting to get interesting, because those of us who got engaged with this because it came from here, it was a values decision, are now seeing it's a value decision. And we're having these conversations with CFOs to say, this makes sense, because if you don't do it, you're putting yourself at a lot of risk. And there's a lot of liability that you're going to have ultimately around your dependency on the cotton market. So those are the kinds of equations we're trying to solve, so we can at least present what it looks like when you can't operate your business anymore the way you have been for the last 100 years. So more principles of circular economy. Preserving and enhancing natural capital by controlling finite stocks and balancing renewable resource flows. That's right out of the book, Cradle to Cradle. And I think what's beautiful about that is it's not just about the product and the material, it's also about the way in which we make it, and that there are resource flows that go into everything we do, from getting ourselves to work, to waking up in the morning and taking a shower, to everything we do has some kind of depletion of resources. And Cradle to Cradle design thinking says not only are we renewable and circular in our materials, but we're doing it with clean water stewardship. We're doing it with more increased renewable energy. So our standard actually asks companies to increase their renewable energy in the production of that product. And over time, I think we'll probably evolve to having a cradle-to-cradle process that we can verify as well too, that says you're making this product in a way that adheres to these natural systems. To me, that's a big part of what the future needs to look like, is who makes the materials to go into this economy, and who is making them in the right process. So shifting from product ownership to leasing model is another one. You heard me say, sort of jokingly, but maybe not, that some of the developers of raw materials may actually get into the business of secondhand, virgin quality materials. And I think that's probably where we really need to start thinking about this, which is if we can track where everything is in that intelligent materials concept, we know where everything's going to go into a next system, then it becomes a lot more interesting to place value on it and actually have a value. And this is happening in the built environment, buildings as well, with the concept of buildings as material banks, which when the green building movement was started, I think LEED looked at so many, and still continues to look at so many ways in which a building can be made to be excellent in energy and environmental design, but also now looking towards where buildings have their own lives, and that when you disassemble them, as ultimately you will disassemble a building, you want everything to be a nutrient for a future system as well too. So we've been working with organizations out of the Netherlands, like a group called Delta Development, which if you go to Amsterdam, please go visit. It's a commercial development that's all cradle-to-cradle design thinking, with butterfly field right in the middle of this office complex, and clean water, and they grow their own herbs for the restaurant that's on the property, and that boasts the highest number of cradle-to-cradle certified products for buildings in any kind of space. So it's a great place to see. And I think as we start to replicate places like this where they have bricks that can come apart at the end. So if you want to move walls or pavers, you just, like Legos, take them apart, and then it can be used in another way. And so this is the kind of thinking of how can we build so that everything has some kind of modular kind of quality where it can go back into another system. So then in that case, do you actually own your walls or do you lease your walls? Do you own your elevator or do you lease your elevator, you know? And these are the models they're building out, and they're showing that it actually makes more sense to get the manufacturer engaged in this leasing relationship. Waste is designed out in a circular economy. It doesn't exist, and it's designed out by intention. I think I've already kind of covered this, but it's important because you'll hear the expression sometimes, there is no way. And I think about that a lot too, which is, you know, where are we sending this stuff? You know, why are we designing with this concept of something called waste? Packaging is the next big horizon for us to get a handle on, because there's one thing when you're talking about, you know, a carpet tile that you're going to make and probably is going to be on this floor for 5, 6, 7 years, depending, maybe longer, maybe shorter, but it's got an extended use. But for packaging, you're talking about something that interacts with a product for a matter of weeks, is on the shelf, and then it's in a landfill. And these are plastics that we've pulled out of the earth, and you know, we're not going to get that back, and it's not going to biodegrade. So you start to look at, you know, how unmindful these practices are and how we can shift ourselves into more mindful thinking around the way we utilize precious resources. So I don't advocate for no plastic. I just advocate for use it in a way in which you're getting it back for high value, and then it's also having a positive impact, not a negative one, because a lot of catalysts that are used in plastics are hazardous as well too. So some of the formulations we need to rethink, and you're all familiar with that because you've been hearing about banned plastics and food containers and things for several years. So I want to kind of also talk a little bit about this, because in a circular economy, there are two nutrient systems, and the circular economy is going to focus a lot on the technical, because this is where there's a lot of value. What's also happened in the past is if you have a material that you didn't know what to do with, and you potentially couldn't landfill it, or in some municipalities it's expensive because you have to pay to landfill it, then you just send it over here and burn it. And you'd burn it, waste to energy. It's also probably not the best use of material, is to just, you know, put all this infinite resource into building something, making something, and ultimately burning it, not to mention the CO2 issues that we may have, or toxicity if we burn. But biological systems can look at things like soaps and, you know, personal care products and even cotton to some extent. But in my thinking, if you are spending all of this labor and energy and water and time to grow cotton to put into products, don't you want to try to figure out how to keep that cotton out into the system? And like we said earlier, maybe cotton comes back and goes into a rayon type material as a cellulosic, which the science for that exists. So maybe we just need to create a better, higher market for it. So starting to think of even biological nutrients as technical nutrients. And that's something that we talk about a lot. Wool obviously comes back into wool fibers. So there's a lot of ways to keep things in the system as long as you can. And that's sort of a cascading theory of, hey, maybe we can't keep this for 7, 8, 9, 10 generations, but if we can keep it for 1 or 2, we can reutilize those fibers and materials before we send it off to the biological system. And we just want to make sure when we designed it that the chemistry, the dyes, the pigments, the colorants were such that once we're done with it over here, when it ends up back over here, it's safe. And that's what the chemistry and the material health of Cradle to Cradle does, is it looks at inventory, what's in your product, screening, what do we want out of it, let's ban the things that we know we want out for intended use, an assessment of how we're going to use those materials, and then ultimately optimize when something doesn't exist we need replacement for. So there's a lot of materials out there that we just don't have the chemistry yet to replace. And so when you hear like, why can't we ban flame retardants and they're on all these sofas and children's pajamas and things, you know? Well, we have laws in place for them, and we haven't found a better substance yet. Or it exists, but there's not a demand for it. And that's what we're finding out in conversation with the chemical industry, where they'll tell us, you know, we can actually make that dye, it's just nobody's asking for it. So one of the roles that I think we are playing increasingly at the Institute is to start to aggregate volume pooling for good materials. So if we can identify this is a fiber that's going to be useful in a circular economy, can we get Nike and H&M and Patagonia and all these guys behind the weight of volume? You know, we can prove that we need it. So the principles of a circular economy designed for remanufacturing, refurbishing, and recycling. I talked a little bit about that. This reminds me a little bit of that Patagonia ad that came out a year ago that was don't buy this jacket, which we were talking about that earlier today too, because it was actually a great marketing scheme for them, which they didn't even intend to, because I've talked to people at Patagonia they were authentic about that, because they want you to really think about what it is and what's embedded in this, what's embedded in these products. And so as we start to think about, hey, there are systems in place for, just like our grandparents and great-grandparents, actually repairing the things that we had, fixing them, darning them, repairing them, or centers that will be created. Patagonia has a partnership with people who do this repair work for them. So I think you'll see more and more of that. We see it in electronics to some extent, and where you can buy a refurbished, for a cheaper price and have a guarantee or warranty on it. And so I think more and more of that is going to feed this sort of positive concept of materials too. And then maximizing the number of cycles or times you've spent. And again, like I said, not everything can go on indefinitely. Some materials can. Aluminum, can go on and on. You keep adding aluminum to it. But others, like certain types of plastics, we're going to have to continue to add virgin material to it to keep the performance levels high. And then ultimately, maybe it is something that we can figure out how to make a biodegradable material. And there are all kinds of innovations that big groups like Li and Feng, who produce a lot of the world's clothing, are looking at to say, what can we add as an additive to synthetics so that at the end of several lives it can biodegrade. It's interesting. I mean, I think once we've gotten a useful life out of it, maybe that's not a bad solution. And the other thing around circular economy is identifying and eliminating harvesting or manufacturing processes to degrade, destroy, or permanently diminish natural resources. This seems like such a no-brainer, and yet, this is at the heart of why we're doing a lot of this work, particularly in parts of the world where most of our stuff is now made. We made it here, now we don't. We have other people make it. We pay them a lot less to make it. We don't care about what it does to their environment because they're on the other side of the world and we want our stuff. So, this is what we do. And the thing is that we felt that as long as that kind of contamination stayed on the other side of the world, well, we now know that, this is having impact all over the oceans, all over the globe, all over climate. We're all suffering as a result of the way we're treating things. So the cradle-to-cradle theories of adding increased renewable energy, clean water stewardship, and social fairness is really one to say that we treat where we make things, regardless if it's in our backyard or the other side of the earth, in the same way, very much based on indigenous wisdoms around how we treat the earth, and that we are a subset of nature, not here to control it. Same with renewable energy. We've discussed that as well too, and the increase in renewable energy. The platinum level of cradle to cradle envisions the highest level of using renewable energies, and ultimately we want renewable energy on site in production where facilities will give back to their local grids. That's the future vision. And while we're building this new renewables economy, being able to invest in renewable energy credits and projects is certainly part of how we get there. So I'm winding down a little bit on my talk, and I want to save some time for Q&A. But I just wanted to share with you sort of where we are right now, what products and types of companies we're working with, and where we expect to go next. So 60% of the products that have gone through cradle-to-cradle innovation, methodology, and then certification are here in the built environment. That's flooring, furniture, paints, lighting, construction materials, wood, like bark house materials. These are intended to go mainly into commercial spaces, but can also be used in residential. There's more of a market in the commercial sector, as many of you working in this space probably know, but that'll change. And so, being able to work with manufacturers to make both residential and commercial products that can meet these goals of human health. One of our biggest advocators in this, when I say human health, is Google, actually, and that's why they've gotten involved with us. They have a policy internally on purchasing materials that come into their facilities of which they own, and they're expanding. At least when I last asked them how fast they were expanding their square footage, it was like 50,000 square feet a week globally that they're adding office space, and everything has to be of the highest environmental quality. And a large part is they want their employees to be healthy. They want them to be happy, and so they invest a lot in good light, good design, low indoor air quality. High indoor air quality, low VOC. So that's a big part of that, and they've worked with us to name our standard as one of the highest ones, and that gives us a lot of pull. This second one in fashion is one that we launched a couple years ago. in partnership with the Dutch Postcode Lottery of the Netherlands and the chairman of Google and his wife, Eric and Wendy Schmidt, to get behind the fashion industry, because it's the #2 most destructive on the planet after energy. And of course, energy is part of it too. So as we look at how we can clean up this industry, we're partnering, as I said earlier, with H&M. We have brands like Stella McCartney and G-Star and others that are working with us, and we're putting together scenarios on how we do that volume pooling that I was talking about earlier. If we can get enough large companies to agree on common materials that are pre-competitive and to innovate them with the supply chain, to be in a library of shared materials, then it'll not only benefit big brands, but it'll benefit anyone who wants to create apparel in this way. So that's our play with the fashion industry, and we're pretty excited about the growth that's happening there. Home, beauty, and packaging are sort of the two other non-formed areas that I'll be putting sector focus around over the next couple of years and hiring people to help me build it out. We have Aveda and Kiehl's and Method and a number of other personal care products that fit in this space. We have a number of companies working on packaging. If you go into a Whole Foods market, all the food packaging that's at the salad bar, food bar, is done by Be Green. They're Cradle certified. Gillette has done packaging. Ritter Chocolates packaging is all. I mean, there's a number of them. And so what we'd like to do and what we're finding success in is when we can aggregate the industry as a collaborative movement and say, don't do it one by one, let's kind of create a movement around this. And so that's what we've been doing with this, which is our fashion positive movement. The built environment is being rebranded right now as a strategy for owners and designers and architects and developers called Built Positive. We'll be launching Home Positive and Beauty Positive in the next few years, and following that will be Packaging Positive, which they all kind of fit together. And so by the time you're thinking about what we wear, where we live, what we interact with, it's that in me, on me, and around me that I first heard at the LOHAS Forum, Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability, about 10 years ago. It's really thinking about, can we have these kinds of products in me, on me, and around me? So a last piece that I'll kind of put together here is also the true cost. And so, as I said earlier, we're really trying to have the conversation now, which is, what is the value of this beyond just doing the right thing? What is the value of this beyond just being able to market that you're doing the right thing? And there's got to be a shift from just the values of how we believe and feel about these right decisions to actually making it an economic driver for companies. And so a large part of these initiatives that we're launching, and we're partnering with KPMG to work with us on our valuation models, is to say, we really do understand what kind of true costs are involved in not doing this. Because you can say, here's the environmental impact of a product, but then when you look at what is the impact of that red dyed river I showed you earlier in the community where your people are living that are making this, So that's where we're starting to put some valuation on. It's not just the positive impact of that one product, but it's the whole ecosystem in which you've made it. So what Chris wanted me to also kind of walk through earlier, just a little bit about the 5 areas. And I think you all have pretty much gotten this out of the talk tonight, because I didn't really want to talk about certification as much as circular economy. But as this thing called the circular economy is building momentum, there's a danger, because it's a little bit becoming the new sustainability, and everybody kind of thinks they're doing it, and so everybody's going, oh, we're a part of the circular economy. Wait, what is that again? And so we're advocating to really have definition in this, and we partnered with Ellen MacArthur Foundation to ensure that a lot of the conversations that they're having don't drive this to just being a recycle economy. And why I say that is because what we're advocating for is an upcycle economy. And upcycling is about equal to or higher value, not just downcycling to lower value materials. Because what happens if we create this whole lower value, there's no real pull or incentive. But if we can design products that have equal to or higher value for the materials, then there's more of an economic driver. And so, but the piece that we think is the most important is this one. Because there's a lot of harmful substances that are in the products that we interact with every day. And if we keep just pushing them forward into the system, keep pushing some of this toxicity forward and forward, it's having a long-term negative impact on humanity in lots of ways that we're one day going to be able to, I think, articulate better than our assumptions today around human health and toxicity. So we advocate for safe materials perpetually cycled, with positive impact on humanity and the planet. so that everything is made with positive inputs that have been verified as safe, renewable, with positive impact on humans and the environment. And I think that is actually going to be it. So thank you. Yeah.